My name is John Agasild. I'm a stand-up comedian living in Glasgow in Scotland. But I haven't always lived here. I was born and raised in Aberdeen in the northeast. I'm working on my next solo stand-up show, and I found myself writing and talking a lot about both of these cities. So I wanted to interview some other comedians about their hometowns, find out what they're like, why they left, why they stayed, and what home means to them. This is the Welcome Home podcast. I did actually see on Paul McCartney's Instagram this morning, it was like a clip of, during Beatlemania, and it was a young girl going, yeah. I'm Paula from Brooklyn, and if Paul McCartney's here, I'm his biggest fan. And then he cuts him, hiya Paul. He's like,
yeah, he says like,
cuts to today.
I'm in Brooklyn now. It's a gamble, isn't it, to do that at this amount of time, because there's a potential.
Speaking of giving away your location,
yeah, but I think you could look at his tour schedule for like the city he's in, but like the sort of the gamble that it could be an amazing gift to get that reaction now, or she could have moved on in her life, or anything happened.
Yeah,
but it was sweet. I thought it was a sweet thing to do.
Yeah. And somebody's been like, this is just. We were talking about Get Back and him. What was it? Oh, him being on a podcast or something. Him being on Adam Buxton's podcast and talking about, was it Ice Road Truckers? No, Ice Road Truckers. Storage
American
Hunters.
Pickers was the thing he name checked, which was quite. Just the dissonance of that he was aware of such a niche, like old antique show. Yeah, it was a very odd thing.
Yeah, and but the sort of almost not the inverse of that, but having like a young person having his social media manager explain to him what get something
viral. Yeah. I mean, because they're obviously hoping that
being like, you're not enough anymore.
Yeah.
You're not quite enough. People will stop scrolling, sure, but you're not quite enough.
They want the event of this woman turning up at the show and being able to meet him and stuff, which might happen and would be sweet if it did happen. But who knows?
Who knows? Not everyone's lived such a charmed life as he.
Yeah, that's true.
I wouldn't say maybe not a charmed life.
No, exactly.
He's had a lot of tragedy. In fairness,
but there is there's something weird. I mean, we're doing it right now. The creeping commodification of our lives, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like that. So much is being documented that you start to not know what is public and private in some ways. Like, I mean, you do, but the boundaries are shifting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome. I'm so glad to have you on, because it feels like we must have first met years and years and years and years and years ago.
It was a long time
ago.
Yeah.
And since in all the time that I've known you, you've done stand-up and you've done improv, and now you're back to sort of like doing solo performance, and you still do group team improv occasionally.
And because clowning in a double act.
And clowning in a double act, yeah. So that's quite a lot to cover, but how do you write?
Well, yeah, I was thinking about like what's the most.
And in your own words, would you be a deer and explain what clowning is to?
Yeah, well,
people,
that's
and how you see
it.
It
is quite a nebulous term in a way, and it's like loaded with lots of different things to different people, but my sort of connection with it is I sort of see it as the fundamental form of comedy, which is like about being very present in the actual situation you're in and providing something for that audience, right? That's not a very romantic way of putting it, but to me it's an extension of like the way you would play as a kid, but with an audience, rather than I am doing a show. I think that basically the fourth wall doesn't exist in stand-up to a degree, but the clown is like seeing the audience typically. So that's what, but I mean, there's all different sorts of clowns. So almost anything you say, like there'll be a counter example. But like the stuff that me and James do, we don't speak, which is quite, so it's a lot more about what we're doing than what we're saying, and the energy and just silliness. So that's what, yes, I suppose for people that are immediately imagining red noses and face makeup and stuff, we don't have those aspects. Although I think we're from the same tradition as people who did have those. Does that answer your question? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get what you mean.
It's like almost like the stand-up I do, like.
Is that now that would imagine, or it seems to me that that's like 80% like clowning.
Yeah,
like,
in a way.
Mostly informed by.
I would say it's like coming more from that. But I have actually recently, because I'm working on this solo show, which is...
And the material is like elastic.
Yeah, exactly. I think...
Which you'd think it would be in stand-up,
but
it's
it typically isn't. Like, I think that's the thing. It's like... because I'm working on this solo show, I have recently been re-engaging with writing jokes and trying to write good, consistent jokes a lot more than I have been for a while, which is actually a fun process in its own way, and it's really valuable and it's really hard. But the clowning thing that I enjoy is it tends to be less about having a specific idea and more about a connection in the moment. And a lot of the comedians I really grew up wanting to emulate, that they were sort of emphasizing that aspect a lot, like say Ross Noble, or I think it's interesting in like Vic and Bob, because I was always amazed by like that their stuff would seem spontaneous, even though like it would require all these visual stuff that you're like, well, they must have prepared that. And trying
like massive heads or like long fingers and stuff like that.
But the visual aspect is like really important, and the energy is really important in making it work. And I like studied it a lot.
A lot of Vic and Bob would have been like their stuff would have been recorded in front of an audience as well, maybe.
Yeah, well, they started off doing it in a room above a pub kind of.
Oh yeah, thing. But like what you would have seen.
Yeah, on telly.
On telly, yeah, that would have been recorded in front of a live audience.
And the relationship they have with the audience is like key to what they're doing. And I think they were very inspirational, and like they've talked about it and given different sort of degrees of how much they're in the moment and how much things are prepared and all that. I mean, that's the other thing with like clowning and stand-up. I think what's confusing about it compared to improv, say, with improv, like the game is often I'm making this up in the moment because I'm asking for a thing to respond to. And so that is part of what the audience is definitely enjoying, is like unambiguously you're just having to come up with this now. But I think stand-up and clowning, you can blur the perception of like what is made up and what is prepared, and it's actually quite helpful, I think, to make it not clear which bits are prepared and which bits aren't. And so it's like, it's a performance technique, but it means that the stuff that's prepared still feels alive, and the stuff that's off the cuff, it's not just getting a response because it is off the cuff. It's just it's part of the mix, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. So there's a whole lot to cover about in terms of like writing. Yeah, it depends where you want to go with that, man. Like, well, I was thinking about it on the way here actually. That so with me and James.
Yeah. So you do solo
group.
stuff, and then you
Yeah.
have Soup Group, which is you and James, which is a clowning double act, which is silent.
Yeah.
Well, with no speaking,
Yeah.
and you have done that for some years now.
Several years.
Several
now.
years, including, and you usually do it at comedy clubs and open mics, but have done shows for kids as well.
Yeah, we've done it as a family-friendly show quite a lot, and it works quite well in that environment because it's so interactive. Like the bit. So I think what's interesting about that is quite a lot of good bits from that have come in the moment. Like, yeah, well, I was trying to think of an example of a stand-up thing that I'd improvised and then thought that was good enough to do again. And there's probably not many of them because like normally it's the energy of it in the moment is what makes it work. And then you look at it in the cold light of day and you think, if I just offered that without that energy, it wouldn't work. But with Soup Group, some of our good bits have come from us just being in front of an audience with the props, trying to come up with something. We made a decision and the decision was funny, and then we're like, we'll just do that again. And it sort of does work because we are clearly very alive and present. Like the example I want to give you is like in the most recent show,
you both have you both have different energies personally as well, which makes it more, which obviously that's, helpful in a double act, but as well that makes it more vibrant.
Yeah, the dynamic is already live enough and engaging enough to watch. Almost whether we're doing something pre-prepared, it will never be exactly the same.
Mm-hmm.
But like I remember in terms of like coming up with material, we have this bit now in the show where like James starts deflating and then I like pump him up with a concertina file. And that only happened because we had this, just for practical reasons, we had an inflatable frame for him to be in. And we were on at a sort of new material night where we felt comfortable to just experiment. And the inflatable frame was making a slight noise. And me and James were just in the room and we heard it and we thought, well, that's funny, are you deflating? And then so I just started miming pumping him up. I can't remember, he must have made the choice to start slightly deflate, and it got a big reaction and they were like, oh, we'll do that again then. And so it was just that was a thing that in the moment it felt like the right thing to do with the audience there, and then we thought, oh, but that's a thing that works, and we built on it a bit. But yeah, so that's something quite special that can happen. But it's I think it's easier to do that when there's two people. And the other bit that's a bit like that is we had a section in the show that's like the restaurant bit where I would get people up to be at a restaurant and I just serve them stuff.
Yeah, that's great.
And
that's so funny.
That works very well with kids because they're used to playing, so they'll always offer something different. Adults tend to be more wary, they're worried that you've got a plan to make fun of them, but I don't. But
you just want fed. Just want fed stuff that you can
something to react to, yeah. But now I've built up there's so many options. There's stuff to give them if they don't give me anything. But it's most fun when the kids come up because they'll always bring something new into that dialogue, which keeps it alive, which is really fun.
Great. Yeah, I've seen kids go up on stage, when you're doing the restaurant bit, and it's so fun. I'm looking forward to seeing what this solo show is and see how you piece it together.
Thanks, man.
It'll be fun. It'll be fun. I look forward to, it'll be fun for people to spend an hour in your company and see how you try and shape that and stuff like that. So that's Soup Group that you do with James, and you're doing a solo show at the Fringe, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to be on at Stand 2,
Yeah.
9:30 every day. It's going to be called Phil O'Shea Never Pretend to Be an Owl.
Yeah.
So it's gonna sort of have a range of like what I would loosely call characters, but maybe it's like personas or even like masks, like in a sort of clown way of thinking about it. They are all like really just sides of me that I'm choosing to present to the audience, but like sort of like slightly not talking in my normal voice, but mainly just to highlight that I'm emphasizing a certain kind of energy rather than being a character like that would live outside of me. Do you know what I mean? Like, so the one that people have seen the most because it seems to work is like I'm basically doing a Paul McCartney voice, but I don't really think
it's not Paul McCartney.
It's not Paul McCartney. No, it's kind of like my interpretation of his energy as it comes out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, because I wear...
It's like you doing an impression, but you're not... you're not living in his reality.
I'm not making really any comments about him or what I believe him to be like. There's something just pleasurable about...
You might say like... You may... The closest that you would ever get would be like maybe mentioning like... You might say like the group or something like
exactly.
that. You'd say that, and that gets a reaction.
Well, it's interesting because
you're like, I'm not going to say their names or anything like that.
Yeah, well, because I wear the jacket he wears on Sergeant Pepper, which is interesting because that was him making a conscious choice to put on a persona that was different from him as himself. So I kind of thought that was an amazing idea that they had as a group to do that.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of nicking it and highlighting that I'm nicking it by like doing their version of doing it. But like, I think there is something powerful about taking on another persona, and it can be more revealing than being yourself somehow.
Yeah.
Because it reveals like what you might not necessarily normally say out loud, but it's still coming from you. So I love doing that. And then there's other characters that are like still forming. And I'll tell you what is also interesting is like the trying to get the balance between the verbal and the visual, because Soup Group, we just naturally ended up not speaking because it seemed to work better. And I had this view.
It's also James would never stop talking if you decided to make it.
Well, he does vocalize even a bit more than me, just because
he does. But I think he enjoys like the
exactly.
He enjoys that, and he plays well, very very well with that.
Yeah. Whereas when I'm doing that, I just don't really make noises.
Yeah.
And
in a silent double act, he's the chatty one.
Yeah, exactly. But
do you want to lean a little bit forward?
And so I'll be in the thing. No worries. But I tell you what, I thought in this show, it'll be good to have some bits that don't have words, but it's like once you've established this rhythm that you are using words, it's quite difficult to do the shift. And it might be possible in a longer show to like, and at the Fringe to like sell
for sure.
But in short sets, it's very confusing.
Yeah, it's either when is this person going to speak, or they've stopped talking. It's awkward. Yeah, and 5-10 minutes is not enough for that. Whereas in an hour you can have that, and you've got great taste. But you're like but you like music. You're a big music fan, and you, I think, would enjoy like the insertion of interludes and stuff that would separate.
Exactly.
That. And
yeah.
There was some musical interludes and stuff in Soup Group. I remember a couple of
we've
years
used
ago that were purposeful, but not super high in the mix of the show, if you know what I mean. They weren't super pronounced.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I know, I appreciate you saying that.
They were still they felt like that music, even though you'd recognize it as like a whatever, don't know, 40s or 50s tune or something. You'd be like, oh, it exists in the same world as Soup Group.
Yeah, that's very kind of you to say that. Yeah, no, we think about that a lot, and I've been thinking about it for this show, and
that'll help. That would help being like, all right, now it's going to be
a bit more visual. Yeah, I think it is. Music is a really nice tool to throw in the mix, and I do use it when I'm writing, actually, or might listen to the same piece of music over and over again, and think like, what is it I like about that? What is it about that mood that I'm trying to emulate sometimes?
Where were you born?
So I actually I think I was born in Oxford Hospital. I'm not sure exactly why, but it's kind of relatively near to where I grew up, which is Milton Keynes. I don't know how much your viewers or yourself know about Milton Keynes.
My frame of reference for Milton Keynes is the Bill Bailey joke in, I think, Bewilderness.
Yeah.
Where he talks about Marilyn Manson performing at Milton Keynes Bowl.
And screaming the name.
Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
That's my singular reference to it. Couldn't tell you exactly where it is.
Yeah, I mean, my sense of geography is rubbish as well, but like, it just has a blast from the past remembering seeing stuff at Milton Keynes Bowl. But it's basically about an hour away from London. So it's south of England. And
you were born in Oxford Hospital, like in Oxford?
Yeah.
Right, wow.
That's not too far from that area.
That's not too far from Milton Keynes Bowl. You can get from Milton Keynes Bowl to Oxford Hospital.
Well, I think, yeah. But like I say, my sense of geography is rubbish. But Milton Keynes as a place, it's funny that I think there was a lot more references to it when I was younger in media because it's relatively new town. Okay. So I think I looked it up and I think it was like built in 1968.
One of those.
Yeah. So, and it also had this artwork, which was these concrete cows, which was talked about a lot. That someone made these cows out of concrete, and that was sort of referenced. I think they were intentionally making a comment of like the perception of the new town as being, or just covering everything with concrete kind of thing. But there's actually a lot of green space there. So it's like the cows were in a sort of green field, but they were made of concrete. So that association with like the new builds and everything being made of concrete was kind of there. The other thing is because it's loads of roundabouts, because it's newer, it was built on like a grid system. Okay. But the thing about it is that like there'd been settlements there before Greater Milton Keynes was built, and the bit I grew up in had predated the new town, so there is a lot of old history there as well, and there's a lot of green space like very near to my house. So like, you know, compared to London, or like, you know, in the little town that I grew up in, like 20 minutes walk from my house, you would see livestock. Like, you know, could you go around the river and there was like fields and stuff like that. So there was kind of a bit of nature, but then there was the whole thing about the concrete cows and the idea of it.
Was that like powerful. So that was like a local artist like satirizing other people's opinions of Milton Keynes?
I guess so. It'll be really interesting to hear what their actual like take on it, but that's how it's been described. And
And people, this was controversial in the town because people were like, well, this is like a joke at our expense, under our nose.
I don't know that people like hated the artist, but it's almost like it's something to latch onto, isn't it? It's an idea that then can be thrown around.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't think people like were angry at the artist, but I think it was like it was used quite. The place name was used like a lot more, and it probably still is. And
I definitely heard of it. It was maybe like a punchline sort of thing.
And they would.
The joke being,
I don't know, just like it's not that sophisticated as London or something. Do you know what I mean? But I guess maybe.
Yeah.
But then, because I think they considered Alan Partridge being from Milton Keynes before they decided on Norwich, and then they thought it was maybe too Route 1 to just say he was from Milton Keynes, I think.
Really?
I think I heard that, but it would make sense. Yeah, so it's interesting to have a town that, like, when you would say the name of it, people would sometimes laugh just at hearing it. But I have quite pleasant memories of it. I mean, like a lot of your guests.
And are your family from?
They're not from that area.
Well, no, they're not, because it was built in the 70s.
Yeah, but they could have been from that area. But my mum's actually from Scotland originally,
right? And
my dad has Irish German heritage, but they'd both moved there for work, basically. So, and I think it is the sort of place that like a lot of young families would
have been going to at the time.
Gone to, yeah.
Because
it's sort of less crowded than London, but then it's obviously as the price of housing goes the way it is, I think it's more and more people are going to move out there.
Yeah, it starts to look all right. Yeah, it starts to look more and more attractive. And so, and it has and you were saying it has lots of roundabouts, because I guess is it like near the M25
yes,
thing?
Yes.
And is it a town or a city?
It's a city, but I think that was a change that was made at some point. It got city status.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Milton Keynes Bowl. So that's what I understand that to be, from having never been there, or the Milton Keynes Bowl in my imagination is an arena that is a natural stop on a artist's tour that isn't London, that would mean that more people were able to access it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Okay.
So I do remember, I think my...
and is it a bowl?
What is a bowl? Like, it's...
A bowl's Hollywood Bowl?
Yeah, I guess it's maybe like that.
Those are your two bowls.
Yeah, I guess so. It's like a concert venue. The only thing I remember going to was with my brother. I'm gonna
have a look at some images.
Yeah, look it up. Yeah, because I don't want to speak.
You remember going with your brother?
I think there was like a sort of new metal gig there, which had a bunch of different people playing, including Tool and Limp Bizkit, and I think Black Sabbath, which are not new metal, but I think it was just
holy shit
pound kind of thing.
Oh, it's outside.
Yeah.
Did you already say that?
No, I didn't. I was hesitating.
So really not unlike the Hollywood Bowl.
Yeah.
The similarities between Milton Keynes and Hollywood are stacking up.
Well, no. So the other thing is that the other claim.
Sorry, I've just the article is the end for Milton Keynes Bowl ?
Oh God.
Surely not.
But yeah, the other.
Christ.
There's a couple of claims to fame. Is that they filmed a bit of Withnail and I in the little town that I grew up in within Milton Keynes, and they also people said that they filmed some of Superman 3 in Milton Keynes city centre. So Hollywood, watch your back. There's a new kid on the block.
Queen on Fire, live at the Bowl. So Queen have cut a live album at Milton Keynes Bowl. So yeah, you saw Sabbath at Milton Keynes Bowl.
Yeah.
That makes you sound like you could be any age.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, even then, I've always been a bit out of time because I was not into the new metal stuff. I brought a book with me because I was like, I can't just sit around and watch these bands the whole time. But I was more interested in Black Sabbath because they're old.
What do you mean you can't
It's
sit around?
just not my cup of tea. Do you know what I mean?
Right, okay.
I think if it had been more music that I was more into, I would have. But I think I was most interested, I think, in seeing Black Sabbath because I have taste. I like stuff from the 60s and 70s a lot.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Milton Keynes Bowl. See, I think it would be cool to have to be from a place that had an iconic venue like that, because I grew up with the Aberdeen Exhibition and Conference Centre, which is a lot less romantic than that. Or you've got or then now so many places are now named after sponsors. They don't seem to have their own independent identity.
I know,
like Milton Keynes Bowl or even something called an Exhibition and Conference Centre. It's not like now. It's like the Press and Journal Arena, which is like a newspaper in that area. Who's famous from Milton Keynes?
That's a good question. I'm coming up blank on this one, John. Like, do you want to do the Wikipedia? Because there might be someone.
There might be. I'll look at famous people from Milton Keynes. Milton Keynes. There is something amusing about the funny. There's something funny about the name.
Yeah. Is it the number of syllables? Does that help?
I think so. Yeah, I think it is. I think it has good rhythm to it. Okay, now none of these people coming up I'm recognising.
Yeah, that's not a good sign.
And the names themselves are not helping either.
Nah, I think by now I would have known if there was anyone we could claim.
People from Milton Keynes.
Oh, well, do you know what? That Bletchley Park is sort of part of it. So it's not a person, but that's where the sort of Enigma code and all that was done.
Oh, yes.
So that's kind of a moment of history.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah, I watched that film recently, actually.
Yeah.
Who's Errol Barnett? Yeah.
Is he an actual Earl, maybe, rather than a guy called Earl?
His name is Errol.
Yeah, I'm like the guy from the sitcom.
Yeah, there's not really...
No, it doesn't have a major identity. That's the weird thing. Like, for a place to be a punchline.
Oh, Kevin Whatley.
Who's that?
Morse.
Oh,
no, Lewis.
Oh,
sorry.
Lewis. There you go. But
we've got something. It's Morse.
The fact
no.
It's not even.
At ease. It's
not,
just Lewis.
It's the Morse spin-off.
That's huge.
I guess so.
And he was in A Feeder St. Pat. A Feeder St. Pat.
Oh, fair enough.
Morse and Lewis. He, at one point, that man must, at one point, must be
the most famous
on telly
person
every fucking day.
Yeah.
Or at least every week. He must be loaded. Anyway.
But no,
that's huge.
There is something, I think it does feel like quite an anonymous place, which is interesting in its own way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll just leave that hanging there.
And what do you? And did you see any comedy in Milton Keynes, like live comedy, when you were young?
See, this is the thing. Like, we went through to London quite a lot to see things. So I remember seeing Harry Hill in London. It was absolutely incredible.
When you were little?
When I was young.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah. And I think in Milton Keynes at the time, would only have seen like literally like pantomimes and stuff like that. But they have had comics have come, and then like since I started doing comedy, they've had a few gigs there, and I did one and it was all right.
Where was that?
There was just one in a pub, and then they had a few.
Did you remember the pub from growing up?
I hadn't. It was very close to my house, but I hadn't been in as a child. But like, yeah, that was strange. That aspect of it was strange. Yeah, the whole world's colliding thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it felt like you would go to London for like cultural stuff, and then you would like retreat home and like think about it. Like, because there was
I gotta go back to Milton Keynes and have a think.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do. I struggle with I love the Fringe, but there's this feeling of like every day seeing several things. And even as someone that's obsessed with comedy, like that feels too much to me. Like, it's you
got to bring a book and have a break during Limp Bizkit.
I think I just get overstimulated. Like, even if it's all good, you know, I think I'd like to see something and then savor it maybe.
Yeah.
But maybe I sort of set that pace a bit younger when it was like, you wouldn't see stuff that often. Although I was even thinking of bringing this up, like a lot of my memories of being a kid is watching the TV.
Yeah, same.
Which would have been wherever you were. Like, I think for a lot of people in Britain, that was a lot of time.
Yeah.
Was watching the TV.
Yeah.
And that was like a window on the world and like what you're interested in a funny way.
I mean, that would have only been 30 years, like, you know, with the ages that we are, like only 30 years since, you know, like telly becoming like just not the heyday of telly, but it really,
it felt like it was the norm was that it would be on in people's houses all the time.
All the time, yeah.
Which I think has sort of faded away.
Yeah.
Because there's
we're born
options.
within 30 years of like everybody leaving the pub to go watch Morecambe and Wise.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not that. It sounds nowadays weirdly kind of not embarrassing, but a bit like, because you don't want to feel like you're telling on your parents by being like, I was just sort of like plopped down in front of the telly. You're like, no, everyone was.
No, exactly.
Everyone was. And trying to explain that to a younger person now that you're sat down watching terrestrial telly.
I mean, there was socializing. I think there was more socializing because you were all watching the one telly.
Yeah,
I mean, it's still, it's degrees. But like now everyone's got their own devices and you get the choice and you get to see more stuff that's tailored to you. But like the communal thing, obviously before the telly, you'd be maybe sitting around the fire and that's like more intense socializing. But like but you know, it wasn't like everyone was just like zombies, but it's like you are just watching hours of this from as soon as you can remember. So
yeah. But the variety in the programming didn't make you a zombie.
No.
It was still...
Because sometimes it's really boring.
Yes.
So you're watching it, so you're trying to make that entertaining. That you're watching this boring documentary about canals or something, and you're like joking about what the people are wearing in it and like what they sound like.
And then 10 minutes in, you're like, this is actually really
Yeah, well, like by osmosis, you pick up little weird bits that like never leave you. And little phrases, but I just think there's something about that.
You might identify with this. What did I have? I was a big, and this is maybe not. This is more about literally like the home and like being in your home. That I was a huge, and I imagine that you were the same. Like taping stuff off the TV person. Yeah. Just like I had a cupboard full of tapes. The Library of Alexandria.
We had enormous reams of that.
Yeah. And like I remember, I can't remember what it was. It was something I watched a lot, but I got very good at knowing how to well, I learned, I don't know how the fuck I learned, must have been a manual or something of like setting to record something on TV that was going to be like an hour after like I had gone to bed.
That's cool.
And you'd be going to bed and you'd be like,
is it going to happen?
Is it going to?
I just remember being
catching the end of something, and I remember catching the end of one of the last episodes, maybe the last episode of series 1 of the League of Gentlemen. Are you familiar with the League of Gentlemen?
Yeah.
And I remember it would start, and it'd be like, and then it'd be the end, towards the end of the episode, and it'd be Tubbs and Edward, and Tubbs is going like, I hate this town and I hate this shop, and I was like, ooh, and I thought it was like a proper gritty like drama, and I just like fast forward it because I was like, this is on after my bedtime. This movie I'm interested in, and I am interested in that, but there's something about this that is eerie, that is not for my eyes or something, and I would fast forward it really quickly, and then get to the start of like the film that I was gonna watch. But yeah, I was a huge taping stuff off of the telly.
That was
that was the same for you.
It was interesting, and like, so, like, I have a real memory of like just looking through the old tapes that we just had. We had so much stuff recorded, and I was pretty young because I seem to remember like there was a point when I was watching Chitty Chitty Bang Bang a lot, and it was around that time, and I saw a tape and it said Monty Python and the Holy Grail on it, and I was like, what is that? Who is Monty Python? And I was like, I want to see what this is, and I put it in, and I thought, this is the funniest thing. I was just falling about, and I immediately rewound it.
Do you have older siblings?
No, it was, I think my dad or mum must have taped it off the telly, and they are not as big fans as me of it. I think it was just a casual, that's a funny thing that's on the telly. Might as well tape it. And then I became obsessed with it, like to this day. It's like an early memory of just seeing something blowing my mind. Because it has a false ending. You know, at the end, I don't know if
don't remember.
The police come in. It's set in like Arthurian times. It's quite well realized. Yeah. And then at the end, a 1970s policeman just comes in and says, pack that in. And he puts his hand over the lens, and then it like runs, it goes.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so I watched it and I was like, is that really the end? It seems like it is. And then we watched it back from the start because we just to enjoy it. But also like we couldn't quite believe that was how it ended.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I remember that was a huge moment. And when I was saying I taped the audio of the White Album, when I suddenly started becoming aware of the Beatles, because the BBC used I Am the Walrus on like a BBC, because the BBC had some deal, they can play Beatles songs, and I don't know if that's changed, but at the time they could just play Beatles songs. So one of their promos for like,
wonder what that's about.
Yeah, it must have been when they were coming up, but like there was their promo for just like brand BBC with loads of clips of stuff, and it was I Am the Walrus playing. It was like a really surreal song, and I remember being like, I love this sort of thing. This is the Beatles. And so then I listened to the LP of the White Album. I was like, this is incredible. It's like those sort of artistic sort of discoveries were the things that like I really remember, and I kind of associate them with that house that I grew up in.
It's crazy that we sound just like such a couple of old farts, but yeah. It's fine. But that at home, because being at home when you're a kid is so awesome. It's awesome. Yeah. And I was very much an indoorsy kid, and just like put myself down in front of the TV loads and recording stuff and watching it back and things like that. And but even though you're in a home, and if somebody was to say like, oh, you're in a home in the 80s or 90s with terrestrial TV and no internet because it doesn't exist, somebody would be like, That sounds like a prison or something. But when you're a child and you have parents who have their physical objects and their own collections of stuff, that you are like making the connection of I Am the Walrus to like your parents' record collection, which is maybe only in the other corner of the room, but now you have like context for an object that's in the other corner of the room.
But it's also
like mind blowing, and you're like, so am I making sense? That you're like, I am like part of the world that is outside of this home,
like,
but it's also in here. What? This is crazy. That's crazy.
It is mind blowing, and it's like the sort of but sort of in a way, the scarcity of stuff that like really excites you makes those moments more precious in a way, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like you don't even know what you like yet.
No.
And you're seeing a lot of stuff that is kind of boring and you don't get and you're not interested in. And then there'll be a flash of something and you're like, wow, what I can relate to that.
Yeah.
And then you can find it, but there's like little clues to it. You know, it took me, and so for ages, even at the time when I was growing up, like they didn't show the Monty Python series on terrestrial TV.
No.
It wasn't really available anywhere.
No.
So I had
repeats are
once in a while.
Yeah.
So I had a book which had a list of what the episodes were. And I was like piecing it together. Oh, in this moment I've seen that sketch. I don't know what that sketch is. Like,
or crucially for me, BBC videos of TV series and them showing adverts at the start for other videos.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? And you're given a montage of like Red Dwarf, Only Fools and Horses, Vicar of Dibley, Dad's Army, Steptoe and Son, Fast Show, something, and you're just like, I don't know if I like all of this, and punchlines being presented completely kind of out of context, but you're like, that doesn't make any sense, but God fucking help me if I won't remember that for the rest of my life.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say.
And then you're like, oh, that's what that is. You might watch it years later, and I mean, it's not something that is not like Del Boy falling through the bar or the chandelier thing or something like that. Maybe it's like, you're like, I remember, it's not Love Thy Neighbor, but it's something like a Jewish family in London, and it's the character Alf Garnett.
Oh yeah.
What's that?
So, what is it called? I've never really
Till
watched
Death Do Us
it.
Part.
Yeah, so I don't really know about it.
But I just remember a clip from the start of a video, and the joke is him being like, so yeah, Mary and Joseph, they couldn't find anywhere to stay to have the baby Jesus, and then his wife goes, well, of course everywhere was busy, it's Christmas.
Yeah,
and it's just like, that's so funny. But me being like, I don't really know what I'm getting at, but yeah, you piece things together from
little
just
scraps.
from little scraps. Yeah,
it's there is something about it, and then like I think somehow those moments that make a big impact on you when you're younger can like really. I mean, you can see the influence of those things I'm talking about on what I do now, and it
might be whether you like it or not.
Yeah, like
it might be just little scraps of whatever you've found. It's not. It's a lot less conscious than.
No, it goes in, but I also definitely before that, my granddad got me a video of this thing called The Plank, which is Tommy Cooper and Eric Sykes in basically a silent comedy from the 70s.
I've never heard of that.
It's called The Plank. You should look it up. And so I think originally it was like a sketch, but it's like a feature-length film about them going around with a plank. Like they're two workmen, and the plank is kind of the antagonist causing all these problems. Like, so they really build up the menace of the plank while they do it like a sort of slightly, maybe it's like a 2001 parody with the plank like coming up from the yard, and then it just keeps knocking people over the head basically in different ways, in a very 1970s way. Yeah. But like, I absolutely loved it as a kid, and obviously I'm pursuing that like physical comedy now, and that was, that was my granddad sort of knew, all right, kids like this kind of stuff, they'll get it. And you're able to watch that and just be like, this is really funny. Like, there were references which would be very dated in terms of people's attitudes or whatever, but the actual just like being hit on the head with a plank aspect of it, like, and even and the feeling, I remember that when me and James are doing stuff, I'm like, well, for the kids in the audience, this can be their first exposure to this, like this type of thing, and it's really special to see it for the first time. Yeah.
And that's, it sounds crazy and doesn't sound, I don't want to label it as like it sounding pretentious, because it's not. Well, it isn't that you're like, kids need to be taught that being hit over the head with something by accident when someone turns this way is funny. Well, they need to learn that, and who's going to teach them? Because they're not watching Tommy Cooper. These kids, they've just got an iPad in front of them, and unless the algorithm takes them from Paw Patrol to to the plank,
it's not so much that they need to. It's that I know they'll enjoy it. That's the thing, and it's like, I think there's simple and also it's the generations being able to enjoy it together. It's quite special. The fact that I knew that my granddad was enjoying that basically in the same way I was. Yeah. Of like, and like, there's not many things that can have that thing for people, like, and sort of obviously physical comedy doesn't work for everyone, but it can unite people. And then even stuff like The Simpsons or whatever, that is incredible in terms of there is something in it for every age group to enjoy, so you can watch it all together and know that everyone has enjoyed that thing, and you're part of a sort of group then. It's really, that is something really nice.
And I think that watching stuff with your granddad is such an important thing. That's like, I watch stuff with my granddad, because then you might go round to your granddads and you'd be like, well, what videos do they have? Do they have? These people born before World War II, you're giving them a hard time because they've got a shit video selection. But like, give them a break. And then you're like, what you watch with them is very, it has to be pretty unifying. Unifying stuff. I remember watching the Blair Witch Project with my grandma and granddad, and then being like, I didn't get that at all. They just thought it was amateurish. But I remember watching. I don't remember what comedy stuff I watched with them, but I definitely did watch other stuff with them. My granddad was more into like sci-fi stuff, but. Yeah, watching things like that and being exposed to things like that, even dated stuff like that would have been in that, sometimes it doesn't go in sometimes when you're a kid. You just like get that it's like a rhythm of a joke that is beyond you. Yeah. And you're like, that's not for me. I'll find out what that is. But you kind of go like, all right, well, I'm not interested in that. You might be like, well, what's that? And somebody might just say, oh, they'll tell you when you're older or something. Well, like that.
No, I think.
But you understand that rhythm is funny or something.
Yeah. I mean, I think
if you're of an age, if you're young and comedy minded,
exactly.
Then it goes in. People save that for a later.
Yeah, I think because I've met people who don't have this same massive emotional connection to comedy, and I'm quite surprised to hear that I do. Because it's very important to me, and I can't exactly put it into words why. Yeah. But it's a language, I think, and the rhythms. It's really interesting how much rhythms work, even if you don't know the meaning of, or if there is no meaning. Yeah. And I think that's why I'm drawn to clowning. You can kind of emphasize that you're not trying to impart a meaning. You're trying to have fun, so my other, the same set of grandparents, they had a few comedy videos. They had a lot of Ken Dodd stuff, and I used to watch that, and I wouldn't understand a lot of what he was saying, but it was funny. I could tell it was funny.
Yeah.
And the rhythm is like a big part of it. Like, I think it's it's fascinating to me what the rhythms do, and what visuals can tell you. Yeah. Well, the other thing I wanted to bring up, like, I don't know why, but it's sort of on theme. I remember, I feel quite fortunate there was a lot of books around in the house, and there was this art book that was a load of Rene Magritte paintings, right?
Okay.
And I'm still obsessed with Rene Magritte to this day, and I remember
what's one of his like biggest?
So he did the guy with the bowler hat and the apple on his face, which is
I've seen you do a sketch.
It's I love that painting, and also it's like very iconic, so it was worth, I thought, enough people would know it for it to be worth trying to do something on it. But yeah, so he's a Belgian surrealist. I think his work became suddenly more in vogue again in the 60s, and so a lot of people use it. So you've sort of seen his imagery, even if you haven't seen the paintings, because this idea of a dreamscape being like blue sky with white clouds and men in bowler hats, like that was him kind of. Like, he was doing that that was sort of his language. He didn't invent those things, but somehow his rendering of them like became associated with dreams, because he was making these dream worlds that always would have blue sky, the guy in a bowler hat, certain recurring themes. But yeah, I saw this one of it's called Homesickness, the painting, and it's a bridge, there's a street light in the background, there's a guy in a suit with like black wings looking over into the river, and then in the foreground there's a lion just like staring out of the painting. And I saw it and I was just so struck by it, and I just always remember that. And that, I don't know, that image, those sort of, I love surrealism and I love those sort of worlds, and I just remember seeing that and being like, I want to create these sort of juxtapositions of images like that. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and so there's something just speaks to you on some level that it's very hard to put into words. And I think comedy can be like that as well. Some of the stuff that like really grabs you, you'd be hard pressed to put into words what it is.
Yeah.
But there's something, it's about a feeling, I think, often.
Mm-hmm.
That it's hard to express any other way than in that language.
Yeah. And
Magritte, it's a visual language, and then comedy is a different language sometimes, but it's interesting. Yeah.
Wow. It's interesting how it's very impressive how you've managed to bring all those things, bring all those things together. But that is another thing with, watching TV or watching videos or what other stuff is around, of like being a kid in simpler times or whatever, and being like, oh, I'm gonna go get that book and have a look at that book for a bit, and you're just like, you're like, this is the bit of the book that scares me or something like that, and you're like, I don't know why this scares me or something. I mean, a surrealistic book would be very, very particularly.
Yeah, no, there's scary elements, and it's
striking
like what you're saying with League of Gentlemen is similar, like, because surrealism, it can tip over into unsettling, and like some of it's sort of unsettling in a pleasant way, and then sometimes it's like, oh, this is a bit much.
Yeah.
And it's like knowing where that line is for you, like learning it. I remember, because I was a big comedy fan, and then I was watching League of Gentlemen, I was like, this is really good, it's a bit sinister. And then it would sometimes go really sinister when I was quite young, and I was like, wow, like, you know, but those moments, you remember them, and it's sort of like, it's because the disquiet is connected. I think it's a note, you're playing with dissonance of unrelated of ideas, and you're also playing with things that are tragic from one angle and then funny from another angle, and then sometimes they just drop the comic lens, and just say, oh, look, it's sad, isn't it? And you're like, yeah, it's devastating. But I wasn't thinking of it like that. You know, but that can be really powerful, those moments.
But that's very, as you said, you're lucky to have like books around the house, especially art books. But it just feels like that those sort of like resources were a lot more prevalent or valued, like when we were younger. Like a Monty Python book would be so rare, or like a companion to a companion book to a show. It's like you'd have to order that. You'd have to have the order form that would have come with a video or something.
I used
like
to
that,
buy
and like,
so many script books when I was younger. And sometimes it was like you'd read the scripts more than you'd ever watch the thing, because you didn't have the tape of it.
Or you weren't allowed to watch TV at that time. So it's like, no, I'm watching TV.
I'm going to watch it in my head, you know, which is like, it was really interesting. I mean, the Reeves and Mortimer put out a script of Smell of Reeves and Mortimer, which I read, which is fascinating, but I read it after having watched the show. So
you're reading like a script of like what you were saying is like kind of clowning and kind of playing.
Yeah. But they're fascinating because they obviously did write out a lot of it verbatim, but then there'll be sections in it where they would say, oh, this bit we're just going to mess around.
Right.
But like, they were obviously just having so much fun, like whether it was to amuse themselves or to prove it to whoever was going to read it that they weren't being lazy. They would have these footnotes with lists of all this mad stuff that wasn't going to be in the show. They would just go on a riff about, you know, some mad idea to sort of show like, we're not short of ideas. We just want this moment to be more in the moment. So we're not going to lay down exactly what we're going to say. But if you want loads of specific examples of stuff that is not going to be on screen, here it is. You know, and they would have Vic's drawings as well of what the characters would look like. So it was an amazing document to read, but I wonder if you hadn't seen it, what it would be like.
Would it make any sense?
Like, I don't know, but
because it's not like they're making that as a resource. They're more making that as like merchandise.
Yeah.
Whereas now it'd maybe be more like, it'd be viewed kind of differently. A little bit, maybe. Yeah,
well, people getting more academic and analytical about comedy as the day goes on, aren't they? Like, maybe taking it more seriously, perhaps. I don't know. Are they? It felt like what they'd done with that particular one was, it was the text of what they'd handed in, and it was amusing enough to just put it out. There's other ones where you get, and it's clearly the transcript of what went out. And then there's some where it's like, this is a cash grab. We've done a little merchandising thing. But
even still, the scraps of like maybe seeing a photo of them that wasn't in the TV show or something would be interesting. Would be so interesting, and you'd just be like,
because you couldn't Google it. So you're like,
you'd be like, well, I'll go look at that Magritte phone for a bit because I'm looking to be stimulated.
Yeah.
And I'm looking to freak myself out for a little bit. So I'm going to take this book out and look at this. And
there's value to it, man.
For
like,
sure.
I try and do it now. Like, so I got when you're talking about, it might come up later, like home comforts or whatever. I got myself a little DVD player because I like to. There's some stuff that's not on the streamers.
Yeah, I've got a DVD player over there.
And like, so I want to watch it, but also I like to sit down and watch something where there's no temptation to look at another screen or to flick around. To be like, look, this is what I'm spending my time on, is looking at this one thing.
If you pick it up and look at the box, that's not as bad.
Yeah,
or it's still something.
It's, I don't know, man.
It's still something.
There's just a slightly different quality to it, and
it's intention.
Yeah, and it is also the nostalgia of remembering doing that. I had all these VHSs as a kid, and they were so precious in a way, and like you were saying, I never learned how to do this setting time later, so I do have memories of like badgering relatives or other people to like record something because I'd seen it was going to be on and I wasn't going to be in.
Which I remember when I was a kid, seemed like you were asking somebody for like £100. Can you record this for me? Like, you're asking them an enormous favor.
But
somebody's like, I don't know about that. Like, I don't know.
That's exactly the response you'd get, which is completely fair enough because like such an entitled thing. But it was like, to me,
I don't think so.
It was
just a kid being like, can you tape something?
It was so important in my head. Like, it's like, when will I get to see this? Because like,
it'll be 20 years before I get to see it.
It's strange. I wonder, like, are we the first generation really that would have grown up with taping being all the time?
For sure, yeah.
So like, I think with that mentality is probably quite specific to our generation. Like, whereas before it would be more like if it's a real event, then we're going home to watch it, or otherwise we're not watching it. Whereas I think we had that thing of just getting into like, this thing is really important to me, but it's only on at like 6 p.m. on that Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I have to do something that Tuesday. Do you know what I mean? Like, but I guess your priorities are all different, but like that was a feeling for a long time.
Or maybe people just didn't do much.
Who knows?
Maybe people just didn't really do much, or there weren't that much things to do because telly was really good. And it's funny, we were kind of, I think the last time we saw each other at Open Comedy, we were kind of talking about how I started rewatching Get Back, and how the Beatles are talking about the telly from the night before.
Yeah.
Because it's
so
like even the Beatles were sat at home watching telly.
There's something strange about
and George Harrison being like,
watching TV.
my. That's the name of the song.
Yeah.
Like, because
there was
because he saw because he saw a waltz, and then it was something sci-fi or something like that, and he's like, this is like that, but I'm taking the rhythm of this.
Do you know that John used to come up with songs watching the telly with the sound down?
Right, okay.
Just like seeing these like different images coming up.
Wow.
And you can feel it, like once you're aware of that, you can feel that influence, like sometimes. There's something about it.
Yeah, geniuses watching terrestrial TV.
Yeah.
It's so funny, but at the same time when you're watching it, you're like, yeah, this makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Of course after a day of bickering with with one another, they would want nothing more than to just go home, have gammon, egg and chips.
Yeah.
and watch TV.
It's so strange, isn't it? Yeah.
So when did you move away from Milton Keynes?
So, I guess, yeah. When
it was a hell of a tangent, but I loved it, and it's so important to me. The whole TV.
Yeah, like
that.
yeah, you keep what you want in, but like it's big to me. Like
big
yeah,
to me.
I think it was when I went to university. I went to Stirling University.
Oh.
To study philosophy, and enjoyed it a lot. Yeah, so I think
what
that
attracted you to Stirling?
So, I think I was sort of aware of it because we've got some relatives in Scotland, so we'd been up, but I didn't have a clue what I was looking for in university. I didn't know what to prioritize. I think I know that in England you tend to do 3 years as opposed to 4, and I found the 4 years appealing because it was like
the extra time
longer before
decision
notionally getting into the real world. So I think that was part of it. So as much thought as went into it was that. The campus is like quite nice, like it's around a loch and stuff like that. So I think I like the atmosphere of that, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like I say, like I've grown up like having green space quite nearby, and I've always liked going for walks and stuff, and that was very accessible there. So that side of it like worked quite well. Yeah. So I think that was why I ended up there.
Yeah. Got a great train station, Stirling. Stirling train station. Yeah, and you were there for 4 years. Yeah. And what's Stirling like? I don't know the town super well. I've got pals that went to uni there. But I couldn't tell you much about the town.
Well, it's the same here.
It was the old capital.
Yeah, like I'm very conscious of all these things. It's like my experience of it, which would be different.
That's all you can offer.
That's all I can say. So, but it was as a student. So, like the idea of being in, like, I still want to say away from home, because that's how it felt at the time.
Of course.
So, having my own place to stay was completely new.
In another country.
Yeah. And so I met people that I got on very well with, and the campus is like, you're living on the campus. And then at maybe second or third year, we went and had a shared house in the town, but we were in our little bubble. There's a theatre there, the Toll Booth, like venue, and me and my friend, we wrote these like plays that we put on, and we put on one of them there, which was a nice memory.
What were they like?
The plays?
Yeah.
Well, like they were meant to be funny. Like they were comedic, and my friend is very talented and very similar taste to me. So I think we bonded over really liking very surreal, absurdist stuff. So we just, I don't know, like I think we just thought, let's write a long thing. So I was studying philosophy and English literature at first, because you can change about. So I was trying to do a joint because English, in theory, like is more likely to lead to like, you could be an English teacher or something. Yeah. And then I dropped the English because I was enjoying the philosophy more. But like, I think a little bit because we were studying like plays and stuff, I was like, oh, I could write a play. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
But it was comedy. It was very, the biggest influence, I think. There was a bit of Python-y stuff in there, but Vic and Bob, like, really, I think, gave us the idea that you could just put something on, Like, if it makes sense to you, you just do it. Like, you just have the stuff and you just do a show. So we wrote all the words, but then we had all these props because we just loved, like, the look of their show. They have this desk with all those props on.
Yeah.
So we just bought all these props, like that, some of which were really not called for in the script we'd written. And then we had a group of us there, and like things would go wrong because we didn't know how to put on a play. And then so the first one, it became improvising with what we had in front of us. And that was funny, and the audience, was probably mostly people that knew us, found it funny. But it was, I think it was like a first foray into like understanding how much of a connection that improv makes with an audience. Because the stuff we'd written was so abstract. There was a potential for it to be funny, but the connection came from, well, we're in this room and I've got this big bell and I've dropped it, so I'm going to say something about that. Do you know what I mean? And that was more honest in the moment. You know, everyone could see that's happened, and you've just know the rhythm of something funny to say. And that was what worked the best about it, I think. So yeah, it was very instructive for future stuff. Like, it was, you know, some 20-somethings putting on a comedy show. Yeah.
And it sounds like it was more like the footnotes of like the Rick and Bob stuff than the actual like script.
Yeah, I think so.
It was just like, these are the...
Yeah, we would spend a lot of time like coming up with very intricate ideas that were then quite hard
but not how to go from
how
each
to
one,
how to realize
to frame them.
Yeah, exactly.
Or how to explain them.
Yeah, no, I think definitely the more and more I've gone on in comedy, like I've learned the value of like clarity. Because I think Vic and Bob are incredible, and they like some of what they have done like just goes counter to what so many people would tell you in terms of like they throw in extraneous stuff and they make it work because they're so good.
And I know that they've come up through live performance and stuff, but what you forget is that before they came on TV, I'm going back to our previous point of telly and stuff like that, that before they came on TV, you would have had, and now some alternative comedy from Vic Reeves and Bob Mortimer. And then you're like primed for what it is.
And the audience there are fans of theirs.
But then you'd be like, all right, okay, so this is something different I'm about to watch. Yeah. And then you're prepared for it. Whereas somebody's like...
I'm going to watch a play.
Ladies and gentlemen, Phil O'Shea. And you're like, hi, okay, I have to lead into something different within 10 minutes.
On a stand-up bill, it is very difficult to like establish a different rhythm and to like show like...
Change your expectations a little bit.
Yeah, it's so hard, you know, and I think it's a good discipline for me to like learn how to make stuff work in different environments. But I'm looking forward to the Fringe because I'm going to use those techniques, but like also slightly set out my own stall of like, this is the kind of thing I'm doing. And like creating that atmosphere for the audience.
Yeah. But I think when you're talking about that end of the spectrum of what the fuck am I trying to say? That end of the spectrum of the really intricate, thought out footnotes. Yeah, that is what you and your mate would have been excited about and be like, oh, and then we'll get a bell and we'll drop the bell on the ground and then you'll say something about the bell and you'll have like a pretend shark fin or something and you'll have it on your back, but it'll be round the wrong way. So when you'll be doing the Jaws theme tune and but it'll look to me like the shark's actually going away. That actually makes more sense. But like, stuff like that, you're just like throwing all that stuff at it. That's like the actual genuinely like purely creative thing. And then at the other end of the spectrum is like, okay, well, how do I get into that? Well, how do I get into that from that? And then sometimes you stop even thinking about that because you're thinking like, oh, well, how will it make sense for me to get into that from that, or to connect that from that? So you talk yourself out of coming up with stuff. Whereas the clowning, the delivery of clowning seems like it's easier for you to kind of do that.
Yeah, definitely.
To bridge between things.
Yeah, well, I think one thing is like...
where you could be a man doing an impression of Paul McCartney talking about going to the cinema, and then because you're and then talk about something else that might be
you're alluding to the trumpet full of popcorn, and I appreciate you not giving away the best visual joke but I mean I probably think.
But you see what I mean? Like it's in.
No, I know what you mean. I do know what you mean. I think I do spend more time than you might think for these short segments figuring out how to frame stuff, but there is something you just learn over time, like based on like what your taste is, what kind of thing you're trying to do, like how best to serve it, like and how what best works for you, and definitely I do think like basically you show the audience what you're going to do, right? So if you can do that in a way that works, then they'll go with you. So basically, if you want the whole set to be really weird and uncompromising, you just got to start by being weird and uncompromising, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm not so much in that space now when I'm doing shorter sets, I'm more like, I want to lead people into something that has a loose connection to reality, and like just gently take them to an area that's my world, and like follow them each step of the way. And it's like, if you're not going there, okay, well, we're here now, what's happening here, you know? So there's a lot of different options of like places you can enjoy like together. But it is I love people that like really have that, they're just like, I'm going full out with this thing, and I don't mind if a big percentage of the audience isn't into it, because I know it's good enough that the people who do like it are gonna love it. Do you know what I mean? I've sometimes gone in that direction, but like I don't know what I'm saying. I like
if the joy comes from if what you're focusing on is the joy coming from discovery in the moment, and the pure pleasure of people laughing together from.
It doesn't
in the moment.
It doesn't matter what it's about, really.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It kind of doesn't matter what it's about. But then why would you
confront them with
run
something?
ahead? Yeah, why would you confront them and run ahead of them when you want to guide them and hold their hands?
Exactly. That's the thing. It's like, it's finding a point of connection, and like in a stand-up club, like people have got used to a certain rhythm, and they've got used to like however many laughs are happening every however many seconds. On a clowning bill, sometimes there's a different rhythm.
Yeah.
And that's kind of useful to like play from that place. And then obviously you've got an hour-long show, you can set your own rhythm.
Yeah.
That doesn't have to be the same, but like part of it, I think if you're doing the short spot, or the way I approach it is like, I probably need to like either match the rhythm that other people are doing, or show them, look, I'm doing a different rhythm now.
Yeah.
And that might take a minute for them to see, okay, it's a different rhythm.
Yeah. So when did you move from Stirling then?
So then I ended up, so it's sort of, I'm a bit hazy on the details of exactly, but basically I graduated, I moved to Edinburgh for a while, and then I was down in London for a bit because basically I was in Edinburgh pursuing comedy maybe a couple of years, and then someone said, oh, you want to do this, you should really go to London. So I went to London for a bit, which was interesting, but a bit overwhelming perhaps. And then because I've got family up here, I was always coming up, definitely at the Fringe, for example. And then at some point I was like, I'm just going to be based here for a while. So that's sort of what it's been since uni, like a couple of years in London and a lot of years in Edinburgh. And
that's been just circumstantial of you. Edinburgh has been familiar.
Yeah.
Edinburgh was familiar when you were like when you were younger.
Yeah, basically that's kind of what it is. And then I made some good connections up here, and then I've like sort of felt like at home here. So I did feel sort of at home in London, but I did feel like it's such a big place.
Yeah.
I found it quite a bit more easy to be isolated.
Yeah.
That might have been to do with where I was in my own life at the time. I think
a lot of people, regardless of where they are in their life, get that.
Yeah, I think so.
In London.
I think it's that, you have to travel so far to get, because you're like, oh, this person's also in London. Maybe we'll hang out all the time. And then you like figure out like the tubes and their schedule. And you're like, we're not going to see, like, when are we going to see each other? You know? And then especially if you're gigging at night, the travel to the gigs, even within London, is like quite a lot of travel. I mean, there is more. Certainly at the time that felt like there was more opportunities there in some ways, but I really like a lot of the opportunities up here for comedy and for experimental comedy, and feel like I'm in a good place with that. So
there's a bit more incubation.
Yeah.
So do you like Edinburgh?
I do. I love it.
What do you love about Edinburgh?
It's pretty beautiful.
Yes.
Like the architecture. I'd never get tired of it. Like there's so many beautiful things to see. Like, I love walking around the meadows or around like the Botanic Gardens.
It's super walkable as well.
Yeah, I love. See, I don't drive, for example.
Yeah.
So like,
I mean, nor do I. But Glasgow's got really good public transport. It's very different with it's quite spread out. But
yeah, the ability to like walk everywhere
is great.
I love that. Yeah, and I love going for walks to like clear my head. So I think that feels like very nice.
Yeah. And the historical element makes it feel like, I think that you never really do take it for granted. Sometimes, even if it's pissing you off, even if there's like loads of tourists around, you're just like, oh yeah, that's because this place has got so much history and stuff. Like
it's incredible.
You never take it for granted. You can't deny like what some of the buildings look like, and it is amazing. I think living in Glasgow, sometimes I have like a bit of a chip on my shoulder about Edinburgh, and I'm a bit like, oh, I just cannot imagine. Excuse me, what it would be like to live there. But I'm like, well, yeah, you just find out flat and you just get a job and you'd live there. But I do the I think, and going through there just for gigs, sometimes you're just a bit like, oh, then you develop a relationship with the city that is just like for work or like for gigs.
Yeah.
And sometimes once a year or like twice a year, I will go through to Edinburgh purely for pleasure, and I'll be like, yeah, this place is amazing.
Yeah.
This place is really, really, really nice, and which I've forgotten. And and be like, oh yeah, I totally get it.
But it's like you're saying. I mean, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's about where you are in yourself in the places you're going to is part of it, isn't it? Like, if you're going to a place for a certain thing always, then that becomes your association with it. So it's funny that
what are some of your favorite things to do in Edinburgh that are just things like going for apart from going for walks, there are maybe like free things,
well,
or
the
like
galleries,
and,
there's the National Gallery is great. Like I like going to the library, actually. Like there's the big library
on the bridge,
just off the Royal Mile. It's incredible.
Well, there's
building.
2 libraries across from one another. There's the
So I don't really go in the I think it's just called the National Library of Scotland. So that's a great building, and like there's a great selection of books in there. I often go there to write, actually, and then I'll like leaf through the books and like just see if there's anything interesting I want to draw or like read about. That is one of my favorite places, really. I love going to Monkey Barrel and the Stand. They're incredible places putting on stuff. Obviously, as well, Artisan Roast put on these great nights.
Open comedy every Tuesday.
Banshee Labyrinth have been very kind to me, let me put stuff on there. And that's a great space. A lot of character in their cinema room.
Yeah, it is, and it's a really great pub. In Edinburgh, and even just like your walk there, is something. is an experience. So do you draw as part of like your writing process?
Yeah, I do actually. I thought that might come up. Like I draw all the time, and like some of my, I always have this thing. I wonder.
Is it sometimes easier to draw what's funny than write it? Is
that
what they are? Or?
I think it opens up a part of my brain that is good for my creativity. So there's not necessarily always a direct relationship between what I'm drawing and what I end up making jokes about. Sometimes there is, but sometimes it's almost just getting into the headspace of I'm looking at things, seeing what shape they are, being calm, seeing things that link to other things, and that just puts me in a good headspace for creating stuff. I used to, like, when I first started stand-up, I used to bring on
drawings. We once did a Sunday together in the Glasgow Stand, and I remember you had drawings, and it's one of the most I think I've ever seen my sister laugh ever at anything. I can't remember what the drawing was. Maybe like a dog, maybe like a creature or something.
There was a lot of animals. I did this thing with dogs that had like chins like ice cream cones. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do.
I used to do very surreal things, and like
it's so funny for you to be like dogs with chins of ice cream cones. Do you remember that? And we'd be like, yes, I do. I do remember.
So I do still draw a lot of stuff like that, and then I also just start moving the pen and just see what comes out.
Yeah. And James is a great artist as well.
He's incredible. Yeah. I mean, he's got the kind of engineer brain, so he does these like almost like technical drawings of things.
Yeah.
And
What's his book?
It's a codex. It's spelt in a way.
What is a codex?
So apparently Leonardo da Vinci did a codex, so he's like, well, I can do one. I think it's like a sort of compendium of all knowledge or something.
Right, yes. Because Da Vinci, I really got into Da Vinci a couple of years ago, because he would be like, that makes sense, because Da Vinci would have been like, well, to draw hair properly, I need to study water and the movement of water, so that I can properly draw how people's hair sits, because and it's stuff like that. And he'd be like, well, to draw arms properly, I need to know the anatomy and things like that. You know.
Yeah, I mean, James has got an incredible brain. I think if you go to, you'll find it probably on a link through James McIntosh's social media if you can find him. It's called a codex.
Yeah,
but
I'd have to get him on, but I'll have to get him on the podcast sometime. But fuck knows what what the conversation would be.
It would be
like.
an interesting contributor. Send him a message. He's But
I do love talking to him. He always makes me laugh.
He's a genius, and he's got a very, very individual approach and mind. But yeah, I think maybe it's a link between us. Like, we both sort of think quite visually, and so even if like the end product of what we're doing is not like with Supergroup, it is quite visual, but like, even if we end up standing there speaking, like, we are imagining things, and like a lot of the comedy that I really like is either visual or they're creating pictures in your head. So I think we probably have that in common. It's a sort of a way of processing the world, so it leads to a certain way of making comedy as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. I ask every guest two questions, which is like, what is a home truth, which might be a home truth about sort of, could be about Milton Keynes, or it could be about Edinburgh, and that's maybe something that you that you want people to know about Milton Keynes or Edinburgh, or something personal that you feel about them, about that place.
Do you know what? I think I can't speak for anyone else's experience of Milton Keynes, but I had a great time there. So I have positive vibes about Milton Keynes. So that's all I want to put out there.
Yeah.
Positive vibes.
For Milton Keynes.
Yeah.
It's not the
most glamorous place in the world.
It's not the most glamorous place in the world, but it's no longer, it's not like a, because I would associate Milton Keynes with something like a clip of those montages at the beginning of a BBC video. You know, somebody making a joke about Milton Keynes.
Yeah, do you know
like
what?
Completely
like,
out of context of something, and then I'm like, okay, so that place is a joke. But I haven't got the context of it.
I remember there was this sitcom I used to watch when I was a kid called Mike and Angelo, which is about this little boy who has an alien friend. I absolutely love. But they did a thing where he was like traveling through space or through the dimensions, and then it was like, oh, I'm in Milton Keynes. And it was like the joke, it was like a sort of name that you would reach for in the way people would say Timbuktu for somewhere far away. It's the same number of syllables as well. I think it might just be the rhythm. It's good to be like ba ba ba. Mm-hmm. And like, as well as whatever associations people, I think the implication was about the roundabouts, was the idea that you could get lost or something, right?
In your spaceship.
Yeah, in your spaceship or whatever. But yeah, there's something about that. Yeah.
Yeah. But positive vibes to Milton Keynes and all of its inhabitants.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
And what is a home comfort to you? Is that something from Milton Keynes, or is it something in your home? Is it is it just books and things? Is it love the Magritte book.
I love books. I don't have that book.
Or is it it could be like a ritual, like a little.
You know, actually thinking about it today, like, I love drawing, and just sitting and drawing is sort of can be my happy place. I've slightly got into, I'm hesitating to say gardening because I'm not. I
was like, what on earth are you gonna say?
The thing, I like plants is what I'm saying, right? I've started to get the appeal of plants, and I like taking care of them and giving them water and stuff like that. That is very grounding for me, and that's been a very late discovery in life. Like,
talking to them.
Do talk to them, actually.
It helps, apparently.
Yeah. Do you know what? I get it.
Trying out stuff on the plans.
They're a tough crowd, but when you get them, you know you've got a good bit.
Yeah.
If it works 3 times in front of a shrub, then that's ready to take to the forest.
That's great. I really like that. So you're getting into gardening.
Very slowly, one plant at a time.
The green, because people call it like the green gym. You ever heard of it?
No, I haven't heard
to
that.
as that the green gym.
And that makes sense.
It's good for mental health. And
Oh,
it's
it is, yeah.
outdoorsy and compost and things like that. Feeling that dirt underneath your.
Yeah, there's a physical thing. There's something I read that like the feeling the dirt actually has a benefit.
Yeah, yeah. You just kind of It would be great to. Yeah, you just want to kind of skip forward to being a granddad where you can just garden and then show your grandson some slapstick videos.
I will be ready for that, you know. Yeah, I think it does. I think I have that energy already. Yeah. It's good. Gardens are good.
Yeah, I'm not very good at watering plants, but we don't have a garden, but I do love the park near us, and walking around that brings me happiness.
That's
for
nice.
sure. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to
Thanks,
me about
John.
Milton Keynes.
It's been a pleasure.
And just where do you want to plug your fringe show once again?
I would love to. So August 2024 at the Stand 2, Phil O'Shea, Never Pretend to Be an Owl. I'd love to see you there.
What time is that every day?
Oh, 9:30.
9:30 p.m.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Stand 2, a brilliant room, and I can really imagine you making your own world and owning that space, and I'll definitely be coming along to see what you come up with.